My boyfriend hired a private investigator to follow me on my annual girls' trip. I thought I was just dodging his clingy texts, but the photos he brought to court ruined everything. Now I'm broke, humiliated, and wondering how a man who claimed to love me plotted the perfect legal ambush behind my back. My name's Cassidy. I'm 28, and apparently, I'm the villain in everyone's stupid little story now. But here's what nobody wants to admit: Jordan knew exactly who I was when he decided to be with me. So, I don't know why he's acting all shocked and betrayed. We'd been together for 5 years, and it was honestly a pretty good setup. Jordan had this decent job that covered our bills, and I worked part-time doing office stuff that barely paid for my personal expenses. But that worked fine because Jordan always insisted on being the provider. You know, he'd get weird about money sometimes, wanting everything split fairly, which basically meant he paid for the house, utilities, groceries, all the important stuff, while I kept my little paycheck for myself. That's what he wanted, to be the man of the house. The thing about Jordan is he was always so paranoid about everything. Like, he'd ask where I was going, what time I'd be back, who I was with. It was exhausting. I'd tell him he was being dramatic and needed to trust me more, but his constant questioning made me feel suffocated. I needed my space, my independence, and if he couldn't handle that, then maybe he wasn't as mature as I thought. Every time I'd come home from hanging out with friends, he'd have this analyzing look on his face like he was studying everything I said. God forbid I forgot to mention stopping somewhere. Suddenly, it was this huge interrogation about why I didn't tell him. I'd explain that I shouldn't have to report every detail of my day like some prisoner, but he'd just get that hurt expression and say he was interested in my life, right? More like keeping tabs. The worst part was his clingy phases after I'd been out. I'd come home tired, wanting to decompress, and he'd want these deep relationship talks or romantic dinners. When I'd say I needed alone time, he'd get moody and distant, like I personally attacked him for wanting space. And don't get me started on his phone habits. He was constantly checking messages but would tilt his screen away if I glanced over. Meanwhile, he tried peeking at my texts. I had to keep my phone locked because he had zero boundaries about privacy. It was like he thought being together meant sharing every thought and conversation. Jordan also remembered every argument we'd ever had, like he was keeping score. I'd bring up something that bothered me, and instead of apologizing, he'd list random times from months ago when I'd supposedly done similar things. Why can't we focus on the present instead of dragging up ancient history? The financial thing was constant tension, too. Jordan would get weird about budgets and savings goals like we were some old married couple. I'd tell him money stress was bad for relationships and we should enjoy life while we're young, but he'd lecture about building our future together. He never appreciated how much I contributed in other ways, keeping the house nice, planning social events, maintaining friendships that benefited both of us. Looking back, our relationship had problems way before everything exploded. Jordan was always more of a homebody, content with routine, while I needed adventure and spontaneity. He'd want to stay in every weekend watching movies, and I'd have to beg him to go out. When we did, he'd spend half the time on his phone complaining about being tired. Every year since we'd been together, I took this trip with my best friend, Samantha. It was our tradition, our girl time, our chance to reconnect without worrying about boyfriends or responsibilities. And every single year, Jordan would get weird about it. At first, it was subtle questions about where we were going, what we planned to do, who else might be there. I'd tell him it was just me and Samantha having a girls' weekend, bars, shopping, spa treatments, normal friend stuff. But he'd keep pushing for more details, like he needed a complete itinerary of every minute we'd be gone. It was insulting that he couldn't trust me to have a weekend with my best friend. The questions got more intense each year. He'd want to know exactly which hotel, what room number, if there would be other people around, if we planned to go out at night. I'd explained that the whole point was being spontaneous and enjoying ourselves, but he'd get this look like I was being deliberately evasive. Samantha always thought Jordan was being ridiculous. She'd roll her eyes whenever I mentioned his latest 20 questions. And honestly, her perspective helped me see how controlling his behavior was getting. Her boyfriend never gave her grief about our trips. He'd just kiss her goodbye and tell her to have fun. That's what confident, trusting partners do. Before trips, Jordan would get clingy and weird, wanting intense relationship conversations or planning special romantic evenings. It felt like guilt tripping me into staying home. When I'd return, he'd interrogate me about every detail, not in a missed you, tell me about your fun weekend way, but suspicious and analyzing like cross-examination. I started keeping stories simple to avoid interrogations. Instead of sharing funny details or interesting things that happened, I'd give basics. We went shopping, had dinner, hung out at the hotel. It wasn't hiding anything major, just avoiding him analyzing every interaction I'd had. Jordan also got weird about my phone after trips. He'd comment about me texting more or try looking over my shoulder when I messaged Samantha about photos or inside jokes. I had to be more careful about when and where I used my phone, which was ridiculous. Why should I hide normal conversations with my best friend? Because my boyfriend had trust issues. The frustrating part was Jordan never directly accused me of anything. He'd make passive-aggressive comments or ask leading questions like trying to trap me into admitting something. When I call him out and ask what exactly he thought I was doing wrong, he'd backtrack, saying he was just curious or making conversation. I tried explaining multiple times that his paranoia was damaging our relationship more than whatever he thought I might be doing. If he couldn't trust me to spend a weekend with my best friend, we had bigger problems. But instead of working on his insecurity, he'd get defensive and turn it around, saying, if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't mind answering questions. What bothered me was the double standard. Jordan had guys' nights, went out with coworkers for drinks, spent Saturdays playing golf with friends. But when I wanted a weekend with Samantha, it was this huge threat that needed monitoring and questioning, like he could have independence, but I was supposed to be available 24/7. His suspicion was slowly poisoning everything. Instead of coming home refreshed and happy to see him, I feel defensive and annoyed. Instead of sharing stories and photos, I just wanted to unpack and move on. His paranoia was creating exactly the distance he was trying to prevent. Then came the trip that changed everything. Though I had no idea what Jordan was planning. This was supposed to be our usual weekend, me and Samantha, some relaxation, nothing crazy.
Hey guys, real quick, I hope you're enjoying the story. Don't forget to subscribe, it would really help the page. Thanks for supporting.
But apparently, while I was packing and getting excited for girl time, Jordan was busy hiring a freaking private investigator to follow me around like some criminal. When I think about it now, I'm still shocked he would violate my privacy like that. Who hires a stranger to spy on their girlfriend instead of having an adult conversation about concerns? It's honestly one of the most disrespectful, manipulative things anyone's ever done to me, and he felt justified doing it. The trip itself was exactly what I needed. Samantha and I had been planning it for weeks, looking forward to disconnecting from relationship drama and work stress. We found this great hotel, made restaurant reservations, planned shopping, and maybe hitting bars. It was going to be perfect, just friends having the kind of weekend that keeps you sane. But Jordan's little spy was watching everything. Every conversation, every person we talked to, every place we went, this creep was documenting it all. Thinking about some stranger following me, taking photos, watching me during what I thought were private moments with my friend makes my skin crawl. Jordan completely violated my basic right to privacy and dignity. The worst part is Jordan never gave me a chance to explain anything. He never asked directly about the trip. Never tried having an honest conversation about whatever bothered him. Instead, he played detective and ambushed me with his evidence like some courtroom drama. It was manipulative and cowardly. When I got home, Jordan was acting strange, but he'd been strange for months, so I didn't think much of it. He had this weird energy, like he was waiting for something. But when I asked if everything was okay, he said he was fine. I should have known something was up because Jordan was never good at hiding feelings. But I was still in a good mood from the weekend. He started his usual post-trip questions, but they felt different, more pointed, more specific, like fishing for particular answers. He wanted to know exactly who we'd talked to, where we'd gone, what time we got back each night. I gave general answers because I shouldn't have to provide minute-by-minute breakdowns just to satisfy his insecurities. But then he started asking about specific people, places, times, details I hadn't mentioned that seemed random. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. Normal people don't ask about things they couldn't possibly know unless they'd been watching or following. It was like he already knew answers and was testing if I'd lie. I tried deflecting because I was getting uncomfortable with the interrogation. I asked why he was being so intense about a simple girls' weekend, suggesting maybe he should think about why he felt the need to monitor my every move. His behavior was becoming controlling and unhealthy. And if he couldn't trust me to spend time with my best friend, we had serious problems. Instead of backing down, Jordan got more aggressive. He started throwing out names and places and times like reading from a script. Nobody remembers random details like that unless they're getting information somewhere else. When I confronted him about how he could possibly know these specifics, he finally admitted what he'd done. He told me completely without shame that he'd hired a private investigator to follow me. He said it like he was proud, like he'd solved some great mystery instead of completely betraying my trust. I was absolutely furious. Not just angry, but shocked and hurt and disgusted that the person I'd been living with could do something so invasive and disrespectful. I told him that hiring someone to spy on me was sick and controlling and showed he had serious psychological issues. Normal, healthy people don't hire investigators to follow their girlfriends. But Jordan wasn't apologetic at all. He was acting like a victim, like I'd forced him to violate my privacy by being suspicious. He kept saying if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't be upset. Like he couldn't understand that privacy is a basic human right, not something you earn by being good enough for your paranoid boyfriend. Then he started pulling out photos and documents like presenting evidence in court, pictures of me and Samantha at restaurants, bars, talking to people, just living our lives normally. But Jordan was acting like these photos proved something sinister, like socializing was somehow evidence of wrongdoing. Here's where everything went completely off the rails, showing exactly what kind of vindictive person Jordan really was. Because humiliating me with spy photos wasn't enough, he had to destroy other people's relationships, too, making sure his investigation had maximum impact. Jordan told me he'd already contacted Samantha's boyfriend and shared all his evidence with him, too. Not just about me, but about Samantha. Our entire trip, every person we'd talked to. He'd taken it upon himself to blow up my best friend's relationship along with ours. I was stunned. It's one thing to violate my privacy, but dragging Samantha into his paranoid drama and potentially destroying her relationship, that showed cruelty and manipulation I never knew Jordan was capable of. He wasn't trying to protect himself. He was actively trying to hurt people and destroy relationships out of spite. When I confronted him, Jordan acted like he was doing everyone a favor. He said Samantha's boyfriend deserved to know the truth and he was just being honest. But what he was really doing was using spy photos as weapons to hurt as many people as possible. It wasn't about truth. It was revenge and control. The conversation devolved into this horrible fight where Jordan presented his evidence like some prosecutor, and I was supposed to sit there and take it like a defendant. He had photos, timestamps, detailed reports like he'd been planning this confrontation for weeks, gathering ammunition. What really got me was his attitude. He wasn't hurt or heartbroken or even normally angry. He was cold and calculating and almost excited to finally have his gotcha moment. Like he'd been waiting years to prove his paranoia was justified. And now he finally had his chance to be right about me being untrustworthy. By the end, it was obvious there was no coming back. Jordan had shown me exactly who he really was, someone who'd rather hire strangers to spy on me than have honest conversations about concerns, someone who'd destroy other people's relationships just to prove a point, someone who thought being suspicious justified any violation of trust or privacy. The immediate aftermath was a nightmare, showing how Jordan had been planning this like some military operation. Instead of having a normal breakup conversation where we figured out logistics like adults, he basically kicked me out of what he kept calling his house, even though I'd been contributing to that household for years in ways that apparently didn't matter. Jordan gave me some ridiculous timeline to pack and get out like I was a tenant who'd violated a lease instead of his girlfriend of 5 years. He acted like because his name was on the mortgage, I had no right to be there, completely ignoring that I'd been making that place a home and contributing to our shared life in countless ways. I tried explaining I needed time to figure out where to go, that I couldn't instantly relocate my entire life because he decided to blow everything up with spy games, but Jordan was completely cold, like he'd already moved on emotionally and just wanted me gone. It was shocking how quickly he could switch from loving partner to hostile stranger. I ended up staying in a hotel for several days while figuring out my next move, which was expensive, stressful, and completely unnecessary if Jordan had been reasonable about the timeline. But he seemed to take satisfaction in making the process as difficult as possible, like punishing me for not being the person he wanted. After about a week of no contact, I called him, hoping time apart would have given him perspective on how extreme his reaction had been, how his private investigator behavior had been far more damaging than whatever he thought he discovered. But Jordan was still completely cold and distant. He wasn't interested in talking about his role in destroying our relationship or discussing how we might move forward, or even having a civil conversation about practical matters. It was like he had already written me off and just wanted me to disappear. I tried explaining that his actions had been just as damaging as anything I'd done, that hiring someone to spy on me had violated my trust just as much as he felt I'd violated his. We both had things to apologize for if we wanted to save our relationship, but he just kept going back to his investigation results. That's when it started sinking in that this wasn't just a rough patch we'd eventually get past. Jordan had shown me who he really was underneath his nice guy behavior. Someone who'd rather spy on me than trust me. Someone who'd rather be right than be happy. Someone who'd rather destroy everything than admit he might have contributed to our problems too. But Jordan wasn't content with just destroying our relationship. He wanted to destroy my entire life. The first sign came when mutual friends started acting weird, like they knew something I didn't. Then I found out Jordan had been sharing his investigator's findings with basically everyone we knew, showing people photos and reports like he was building a case against me in public opinion. I started getting strange messages from people asking if I was okay or if I needed support and realized Jordan had painted me as some serial cheater who'd been lying to everyone for years. He'd taken what happened during one weekend and turned it into a narrative about my entire character. People were actually buying his story. Friends who'd known me for years were treating me like I was untrustworthy, like I'd been manipulating everyone. Jordan had controlled the narrative so completely that I was already guilty before I even knew what I was being accused of. When I tried defending myself, people would get uncomfortable and change the subject. Jordan had poisoned the well so thoroughly that nobody wanted to hear anything that might complicate his simple story of the good guy betrayed by the bad girlfriend. Then came a devastating blow. Jordan was planning to use his investigator's evidence in a legal case against me. During our relationship, we'd accumulated enough shared financial obligations that he could pursue palimony, spousal support for unmarried couples. And Jordan was going to use his 5 photos to argue I didn't deserve any financial support because of my behavior. I couldn't believe it. This person who'd violated my privacy in the most extreme way, who destroyed our relationship with paranoid, controlling behavior, was now trying to use evidence from his stalking operation to make sure I ended up financially ruined, too. The legal consultation was terrifying. The lawyer explained that because Jordan had documentation of my behavior and had been the primary financial provider, I was in a very weak position. The investigator's evidence could be used to argue I'd been taking advantage of Jordan financially while being unfaithful, which would destroy any claim to shared assets or support. I started understanding how long Jordan had probably been planning this. The way he'd structured our finances with him paying for everything major while I kept my smaller income separate, that wasn't generosity. That was making sure if things went wrong, I'd be left with nothing while he kept everything. And now, here I am, 8 months later, still processing how completely everything fell apart. The legal battle was brutal, and the outcome was basically a nightmare I'm still living with. But what gets me is how everyone acts like I deserved what happened. Like Jordan's behavior was a natural consequence rather than a vindictive campaign to destroy my life. The court case was humiliating. Jordan's lawyer presented investigator evidence like smoking gun proof that I was some calculating gold digger using Jordan while secretly living a double life. They had photos, detailed reports, timelines, like watching someone present a documentary about my private life to strangers deciding my financial future. The financial settlement was devastating. Because Jordan could prove he'd been the primary breadwinner and that I'd been unfaithful, I ended up with basically nothing. No spousal support, no claim to the house, no compensation for years spent building a life I now had to rebuild from scratch. The judge decided my behavior meant I didn't deserve any financial consideration. The social consequences were worse than the financial ones. Samantha and I aren't friends anymore. Her relationship didn't survive Jordan's evidence dump either. And she decided I was somehow responsible for destroying her life, too. She blamed me for not being honest about what our trips involved, as if I'd forced her to make her own choices. Mutual friends basically all sided with Jordan. His story was simpler. Innocent guy betrayed by manipulative girlfriend is easier to understand than the complicated reality of 2 people growing apart and making poor choices about handling problems. Plus, Jordan's version made them feel good about supporting a victim. I ended up moving back with my parents at 28, which was humiliating and depressing, like losing 10 years of adult progress. Work became unbearable because word got around. People would stop talking when I walked into rooms, giving me looks like they were trying to figure out if I was really the person Jordan painted me as. I had to leave my job and find something new. The worst part was discovering Jordan had moved on incredibly quickly. Within months, he was dating someone new from his work who apparently thought his investigator story was smart and protective rather than psychotic and controlling. Seeing them together on social media, looking happy and normal, made me feel like I was losing my mind. Jordan just erased our 5-year relationship and replaced me with someone who fit better into his idea of what a girlfriend should be. Someone who apparently didn't need girls' trips or independence or privacy. Someone perfectly happy to be monitored and controlled, as long as she got to be with a good guy, wronged by his terrible ex. Here I was, having lost my home, friends, financial security, and reputation, while he just moved on like nothing happened. He got to keep the house, friends, job, and add a new girlfriend who probably saw him as this romantic hero who'd escaped a toxic relationship. Even now, people act like I should be grateful Jordan found out the truth and saved himself from me. Like his behavior was a public service rather than a vindictive campaign to ruin my life. Nobody wants to talk about how his paranoia and control issues had been destroying our relationship long before his investigator found anything. But you know what? I'm done caring what any of them think. Jordan can play the victim all he wants. Everyone can believe his perfect little story, and they can all pat themselves on the back for supporting the good guy. The truth is, Jordan was never the person any of us thought he was. And honestly, that's their problem now, not mine.